Hello team, we're back for part 2 of our series on the purpose of life with Dr. Jeffery Lang. Today we are talking about this continued journey of Dr. Jeffery Lang into atheism. In the last episode, he showed us his childhood and how he had this amazing mother, but his father was abusive. He used to beat Jeffery Lang's mom. He used to beat the children also. And that set him up for a very difficult childhood where he was questioning everything. And most importantly, he was questioning the very existence of God. And why is this the case? Because as Dr. Lang puts it, he's saying, if this God who is all good and all amazing, is this the best he could do, looking at his own family? Is this the very best he could do? Let's listen to it in Dr. Lang's own words.
When I saw the bizarre and senseless carnage of Vietnam, they all confirmed the lesson that was already ingrained in me and that my father had taught me so well, that the world is dominated by random, consuming, undiscriminating violence. And very soon I began to ask why. Why would God make it that way? Why wouldn't he just pop us into heaven from the first and spare us all this suffering? Why does he let little children in Vietnam get napalmed and run down the street naked on fire when they had done nothing to deserve it? Why does he let the race riots go on? Why does he let the leaders be assassinated? Why does he just let the violence go on and on and on for people who had nothing to do with it? It wasn't of their own making. Why didn't he just make us angels and pop us into heaven if he could make us angels, which I was always taught he could? Why did he make us so susceptible to sin? Why didn't he make us impervious to it, like he made the angels? Is this the best world he could create, I thought? Is this the most perfect world he could create for our existence, for our beginning?
Is this the best world that he could create? So what Dr. Lang is asking here is, like we said in the previous episode, one of the fundamental questions of religion that religions have struggled with, that philosophies have struggled with, and so forth. And that, my friends, is called the problem of evil, often known as theodicy in Western literature and so forth. Again, how can such an amazing, benevolent God, if we believe that he is benevolent, he is all good, he loves his creation, if he really loves his creation, how could he let such horrible things happen to so many people? And every philosophy, every religion, and then denominations within religion have tried to address this issue. But this is one of those questions that drives people away from religion when they don't feel like they're getting adequate answers. Now, I'll be totally honest with you. In my own experience, being someone who's born into Islam, I never truly asked the question. Like, certainly it occurred to me, and the answers that I came across, they sufficed for me at the time. So the typical answers that you will hear is like, okay, first of all, we can't possibly understand everything that God is doing because he is so much greater than us, and we are just, we are like mere ants crawling on the surface. So how can we possibly think that we can understand God's purpose? That's arrogant, right? And that's certainly the case. We see that idea in, for example, in Surah Al-Kahf, and we'll get into this stuff, where Moses can't understand why he is with his teacher, whose name is Qidr, and why he is doing certain things. And Moses is like, why would you do this? And why would you do this? And what we get from that story, one of the main things we get out of that story, is that you can't truly understand what is good and what is bad. Things that look bad to us might actually be good in the long run, and so forth. So that's one answer that you will traditionally get. Another answer is that, this world is fleeting anyway. So whatever suffering that happens in this world, it pales in comparison to the afterlife, so it's really not a big deal. Even the worst thing that could happen to you will just be less than a paper cut in the grand scheme of things. And again, another true point here. But if you really kind of sit down with this, and especially if you're having this conversation with someone who doesn't believe in religion or is challenging religion or is on their way out the door, that's not enough for them, because they might just say, well, you can say anything you want to make yourselves feel good, but there's no proof in that. And they need something more to hold on to. And what's fascinating about Dr. Lang's journey, which is so different than my own journey, is that I would easily accept stuff and be like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense, and that's what the scholar said, and this sheikh said it, and so forth, so I'll just sit with that. Not Dr. Lang. Remember, he's a professor of mathematics. He's not going to let anything go by. He needs to see for himself. It needs to sit with him. He's not going to step over something because it sounds good. It has to make sense to him. And that's what I find so inspiring about him, why I love Dr. Lang, deeply. I really love him a lot. I'm actually, I'm in touch with him, and, we've corresponded a few times and so forth, and I've had that honor to just even communicate with him once or twice because he's touched my heart so much. And one of the things I find so touching about him is just his honesty and his bravery in confronting the ideas that trouble him, whereas most of us, and I'm speaking for myself at least, it's just easier to kind of step over things and just be like, okay, yeah, I'll go with that. That sounds good. Not for Dr. Lang. So what he is going to do now is he is going to dive into this question of the problem of evil, because he needs an answer. Because if he doesn't get the answer he wants, he's out. He's already an atheist. He doesn't need to believe in God. So that's what we're going to see coming up right now. So let's move on to the next part of his talk, because now he talks about how he has left the East Coast and he's actually moved to California, where he must be in graduate school or he's teaching at this time in mathematics. And he starts talking about his journey with the Qur'an. Take a listen.
In any case, when I was 28, to make a long story short, some friends of mine gave me a copy of the Qur'an. And one night I was sitting in Diamond Heights, my apartment in Diamond Heights in San Francisco. I was working that time at the University of San Francisco. I was 27, 28 at that time, I can't remember. And I ran out of stuff to read, and I took this gift that my friends gave me and I began to read it. And I came to the first verse. Well, I opened the Qur'an, read the first page, then the second, and then very quickly, in the second surah, about 37 verses into the Qur'an, I came upon the story of mankind. And I have to admit, I read through it very quickly. It was about 9, 10 verses long, story of the first man and woman. And I recognized some of the details. It was similar to what I had learned when I was a child, but I noticed that there was something wrong. It was apparent to me that whoever authored this Qur'an, of course I wasn't a Muslim at the time, so I didn't have any idea who that was, whoever authored this Qur'an clearly did not understand the real meaning of the story, because they had obviously gotten the details confused. They didn't even understand the whole purpose of the story. And so I just read through it once, and then I read through it again, just to try to see what kind of point the author was making, and then I read through it a third time and a fourth, and then I realized this is something strange going on here. I'm going to read this much more carefully. I'm going to need to go through this story line by line, verse by verse, because it's obvious that the author is trying to bring out another point. And I wasn't quite sure what it was, but definitely he packs a lot of meaning into almost every word. And I thought the writer at least seems to have a great measure of brilliance. And so I'll try to sort of take you through what my experience was as quickly as I can. So I came to the 30th verse of the second surah, Surah Al-Baqarah, and it began like this. It said, "Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a vicegerent on earth." The Arabic word is khalifa. It means a representative or an emissary of mine. "I am going to place a vicegerent on earth." And they said, the angels said, "Will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify your holiness?" And God said, He said, "Truly I know what you do not know."
وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَن يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون.
See, that's the verse that hooked me. That's the verse that caught my attention. That's the one that kept on making me read the story again and again and again. Because listen to the way it begins. "Behold, your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a representative of mine on earth, a vicegerent of mine, an emissary, one who acts on my behalf. I thought, that's not the way it goes. You're not supposed to be placing man on the earth in some positive role, some elective office. You place man on earth as a punishment for his sin. Clearly, I knew the author didn't quite get the point. But still, it was an amazing line. But then I come to the next line, and it says, and the angels say, will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we celebrate your praises and glorify you? I looked at it again. I couldn't believe the question. They said, will you place therein one who will spread corruption and shed blood, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you? I looked at that and I said, exactly. That would be my question. Why would you create this being, supposedly for some positive role, when he's capable of doing tremendous wrongdoing? When he could spread corruption and shed much blood? Why would you create this violent and pernicious creature when you could create angels? As the angels clearly say, while we, the angels, celebrate your praises and glorify you. They were asking one of the most fundamental questions in the entire history of religion. Why create you, man, this utterly fallible creature, this creature who could rebel against God's will, who could do such tremendous wrongdoing, who could wreak havoc like no other creature on earth, when you can make them angels? And look where the question is being asked. It's being asked in heaven. It's almost like saying, look, why don't you just make them angels and be up here in heaven with us, Why don't you just make them angels, pop them into heaven, he's fine. Why would you put him on earth where he could feel distant from you, where he can work out his worst criminal tendencies, act them out, feeling somehow independent and apart from you and free to do whatever he wants, when you could just make them angels and put them into heaven and make them perfectly submissive to your will? I looked at that question and said, that's my question. I'm not even a single verse into the story of mankind, and there before me I see my question. That whole question, everything that I ever thought, everything that I ever experienced, everything that I ever knew was in that question. It was as if the author took my life and wanted to pick out exactly the right question to humiliate me, to provoke me, to anger me. Why create man, this most destructive and violent creature, when you could make him angels? And then look at the answer. And he said, God said, truly I know what you do not know.
قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون.
Truly I know what you do not know. In modern parlance, we would say, I know exactly what I'm doing. I read that and said, what? You know what you do not know? You know exactly what you're doing? Well, please inform me. Tell me what you're doing. Because, I'm 28 years old and I haven't figured out it yet. And I have a lot of issues that I'm still dealing with that's connected to this question. You can't just get off that easy. You can't just tell me you know exactly what you're doing. Not after what I've been through. Not after you made me this way. And then I realized, of course, I was arguing with a God I didn't even believe in. And that would happen several times as I read through the Qur'an. And sometimes I would just get into so agitated by what I read, I'd start arguing with this voice that I'm reading before me, that's calling to me.
So we're already only one verse into this story, and there's just so much to unpack. And I love the way Dr. Lang says, what? You know exactly what you're doing? Please tell me, because I'm 28 and I have a lot of issues. It's very true. And we all have issues. So let's try to approach this the way Dr. Lang is approaching this. Now, what is his issue here with the Qur'an? He's saying this is not how the story goes. The story does not go like this. There's something about this Qur'anic interpretation or the narrative in the Quran that is not what he is used to. Now, what's interesting about this, and I want you to really kind of just take your time with this, is that you need to understand, we all need to understand that the story of Adam in the Quran and in the Bible, in many ways they're very similar. On the surface, you have Adam and Eve, God put them in a garden, there was a tree, the devil tempted them. There's these overarching themes are the same. But there are huge differences between the two. And the reason why I want you to kind of really take a moment to ask yourself if you understand these differences is because I myself don't think I truly appreciated the differences between the Quranic story and the biblical story. And I think that may have to do because I was born into a Western country. I have all these kind of Judeo-Christian overlays and just my experience and so forth. And so I too always felt like, Adam, why did you mess up? Like, why did you, if only you didn't mess up, we could have just been in that garden forever, right? But I want you to take a close look at this biblical story versus the Quranic story. So there are a couple of things here, okay? The first thing that we get from this is that God is saying that he is placing man, Adam, on earth as a what? As a Khalifa. Let's take a look at what this word right here, okay? And I'm not gonna write in Arabic because that's gonna be a little bit tough, but right? God is placing man as a Khalifa. A Khalifa, it comes from the word khalf, which means like to come after, right? Succession. So typically it's translated as a representative. In older translations they use the word vicegerent, which is a very kind of outdated word, so I'm not going to use that word. But God is saying, I am placing man on earth as my representative. Okay, someone who is kind of a successor, who is coming after. So if God is saying in the very first line that he's putting man on earth for a reason, we can take away from that God is placing man on earth with purpose, not as punishment, and that man is being placed on this earth in a positive role, right? Because we are representing God. We can't be representing God in a negative way. That doesn't make any sense. This is a huge departure from the biblical story. Because the biblical story, Adam is in the garden, and then because he eats from this tree, he is kind of cast down in damnation to earth, and he has to suffer the toil of hard labor on earth, and Eve has to suffer the pains of childbirth, and it's just this horrible kind of punishment that goes on infinitely. And we as human beings are suffering and toiling and the childbirth and all that kind of stuff because of this idea of original sin. Adam screwed up and now we all have to pay the price of it. That's this more Judeo-Christian understanding. In Islam, what we see is God is saying a Khalifa. That's a good thing, not a bad thing, right? And that's why Dr. Jeffery Lang is like, what? The representative, what are you talking about? This is not how the story goes. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that is really big in the story is that God is saying, when the angels ask, and very important now, okay, because God says, I'm going to put this person as a Khalifa on earth, the angels say, what do the angels say? Why would you put this human being on earth? I'm paraphrasing here, just for all the literalists out there. Why would you do that? They spread corruption, they spill blood. What else do they do? We're going to add some extra things that the angels forgot to say. They start drug cartels, they oppress other countries, they'll colonialize continents, they will rape and pillage the earth. There's all this stuff that we could add on to the angels, ... right? The angels have a point. You got to admit, they have a point. Why would you put them on earth? In Islamic belief systems, we believe that God has created certain creation. You have the angels, you have human beings, and you have the jinn. Okay, and I don't want to get into too many details of this, but I'm bringing this up because we believe as Muslims that humans have free will. They can do good and bad, they can do wonderful things, they can do horrible things. Angels, however, can only praise the Lord. They cannot disobey God. They don't have that free agency to disobey God. So the angels are saying, why don't you put us out there? We will take care of everything. It's going to be amazing. You're sure you really want to put these people out there? They're just going to just destroy everything. Look how horrible they can be. And now what does God say as a response? He says, I know exactly what I'm doing. That's kind of what Dr. Jeffery Lang said, I think. I know, don't worry about it. I know exactly what I am doing. So let's just do a little scorecard here just to make this clear, okay? Let's take a look at the Bible and the Qur'an, okay? So, in the biblical story, is God in control? No, God is upset. He's telling Adam, don't eat from this. And when Adam eats from this, it's almost like now we have to come up with a new game plan. You're going to be punished, right? In many ways, it's kind of like when a parent tells a child not to do something, they might think the child will do it or not. But then when they do it, the parent, we can get upset or, why did you do that? I told you not to take the chocolate chips onto the white sofa, right? And then we get upset and then we got to create a punishment for it and so forth. And that way, we're not really in control of the situation, not completely in control, because if we were, we wouldn't have allowed that to happen in the first place. So in the Bible, do we get the sense that God is in control? And here I'm going to say a big no, okay? In the Qur'an, do we get the sense that God is in control? What do you guys think? Yes, he says it. He says it very clearly. He says, I'm doing this. Before he even does the experiment with Adam or the simulation with Adam, he already is telling us in the Qur'an, I am doing this. And when he's asked why he's doing it, he says, don't worry, I know exactly what I'm doing. So right here, we're going to put a big yes. Okay. Second question, what is man's role on earth? And what we see here when we look at the biblical story, again, is that man is cast down, right, in a negative role. Let's just put a big negative sign here, right? Or how about a sad face? And I don't want to oversimplify the Judeo-Christian tradition, okay? But this idea of original sin is very prevalent in most of the denominations. This idea of man is now here on earth. We are here on earth because our forefather messed up, and now we're just like, oh man, now we have to toil. Now we have to suffer, and it's because of Adam that this happened. And then, this gets into Christology, and then, Jesus dying for, the sins of man, and this and that. So it turns into a whole thing you got to tie up now, because you have a lot of loose ends that Adam left that we're all dealing with. And now Jesus has to tie that up. So it kind of gets into the whole Christology of how that whole narrative works out. In the Islamic, biblical, Quranic understanding, none of that. And this is big. I really want this to be clear, which is why I'm not making a long episode out of this, because I wanted to spend time on this right here, is that man's role right here is entirely positive. Okay? It's entirely positive. We are being put on earth as God's representative, as what did we say again? As a Khalifa. It's a beautiful word, Khalifa. So, huge difference, guys, because this is already setting us up for a giant difference in how we now feel about God, how we feel about our purpose in life and so forth, and how we start seeing everything that we see. It's like, when you get a pair of glasses, right? If the lens is tinted, it doesn't matter about the rest of the world. The rest of the world will look the color of the lens. But if the lens is tinted another color, the rest of the world will look another color. And we're talking about the very first stories of our creation, of our humanness, of our being here in the world. And you're seeing a giant kind of divergent path between two different ones. It's like there are two different colors of glasses that you could wear. And they will taint or color how you see everything downstream from this moment. So I want you to really be aware of this, okay? This idea that we are created with purpose, and that purpose is known to God. We're going to get into that purpose, but we know now, at least the Qur'an is alleging that God has a plan for us and putting us as representatives of His on earth, and that 2, we have a positive role to play in this. We are not cursed and damned. We actually have an opportunity to achieve the role that God is assigning to us. Huge difference from this. Okay, now there is a third takeaway that I want to talk about the story. This doesn't really he doesn't really touch on this, but it's too important for me to let slide. And so we're going to spend a second on this, okay? Notice in this narrative right here, the angels ask God why He would actually do something. Now, this is really important. They're not asking God because they're insolent. They're not saying, why the heck would you do that, right? They're asking more out of respect, but also trying to gain understanding. So they're saying, okay, that's what you're doing and we obey. But why are you doing that when this could happen? And what you do not hear in this story, which is really important, is you do not see God flying off the handle. How dare you question me? I am the Almighty. How dare you? Insolent. Do you not believe in me? Do you have no faith in me? Astaghfirullah, get out of here. We don't see that. That's not how Allah tells us the story goes. He simply acknowledges the question because it's a good question. It's a great question. It's the same question that Dr. Lang is asking. It's the same question that we ought to ask. We are asking this. Why are we creating this situation? God simply says to the angels, I know what you don't know. Don't worry. You kind of like this, you're going to find out soon enough. If you read this Qur'an, if you understand this revelation, you will know. But right now, when I'm creating this to the angels, I know what you don't know. This is really important because we unfortunately do not follow the tradition that God has laid out for us. When people ask questions to the scholars often, or when children ask questions to their parents, when we don't know the answer to that question, or we feel like that question is a threat, what do? Do we act gracious and inviting and encouraging to kids or those searching for information? Or do we say, why would you ask that? You don't believe in God? Don't you realize that that's not appropriate? I mean, the fact that just imagine for a second. Imagine if a 14-year-old boy walked into a mosque and goes to a random, elder in the community, an uncle, an auntie, the imam, a sheikh, whatever. And they say, you know what? I've really been struggling with this issue and I don't think that I believe in God anymore because it doesn't make sense to me, everything I'm seeing in the world today and so forth. I don't know that I believe in God. Can you explain that to me? Because I don't think there's a God. I would imagine that a majority of the times the parents would flip out. How can you not believe in God? What do you think we've been raising you this whole time? Are you going to leave? How dare you? Astaghfirullah, I'm going to take you to the imam. And then the imam, blah, 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 blah. The same way that Dr. Jeffery Lang was treated by that priest at his Catholic school. Right? He failed his courses as soon as he said he was an atheist, even though he was doing great on the exams. And us shutting down those kinds of questions is very dangerous. A, because it is not us acting in the divine way towards our children or towards anyone else who's asking questions. And B, all it does is it pushes people out the door even faster. And so I just wanted to make this point. It's not really part of the kind of Dr. Lang's talk, but it's a very critical point that I just want to throw in there, is that we have to be welcoming to challenging questions. We can't snap and get defensive. And I often think, and I've heard this from my own students, who are kind of high school age, late, juniors, seniors in high school, they often get shut down by their parents if they even bring up the slightest thing, right? Dad, mom, dad, typical hot topic, LGBTQ issues. How do we expect them to support us if we don't support their causes? How is that fair? On justice issues, social justice issues, all this kind of stuff. And there's so many ideas floating out in the world. If we as parents can't handle that, then they're just going to turn somewhere else for answers. And we deserve, as our children deserve from us, an honest appraisal. And I often think that we, as parents or as elders or leaders, fly off the handle or lose patience with people because we ourselves have not explored the answer for our own hearts. And if we don't know the answers, we feel threatened, we often feel insecure, and the only way that we can defend that or kind of do away with the questioning is just do away with the person. And I truly believe this is a take-home message that we really need to kind of just really engender in our community is a much higher level of tolerance, of patience, and of understanding of people's journeys, of where they are and where they're trying to go. The last thing we need to do is actually shove people out the door when they already have one foot out the door. And so it should not be any surprise to you at all that one of Dr. Jeffery Lang's very most famous books is his book, Even Angels Ask. Because he's talking about the same issue. Even the angels were asking, why would you do this? And so I just think it's ironic. I'm making this point about us being tolerant and so forth, and he actually happened to name his book, Even Angels Ask. And by the way, I highly encourage you to buy these books. He has this one. He's another beautiful book called Struggling to Surrender and so forth. Really beautiful stories from a very beautiful person. So anyway, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Revelation Experience. In the next episode, we're going to dive deeper into his journey into the Qur'an and his struggle to reconcile what he always thought about our role in this world and what he is reading in the Qur'an. Stay tuned for that. I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode. Let me know in your comments how this is all working out for you. I will see you soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.